I shouldn't have agreed to live with my mother-in-law. While enduring her usual nagging, I let out a deep sigh. My name is Sarah, and I'm 31 years old. I married my husband, Chris, who is 28, 3 years ago. Although we encountered minor issues at the beginning of our life together, we managed to work things out, just the two of us. A year after our marriage, Chris's father passed away. Feeling that we couldn't leave his disheartened mother alone, Chris suggested we start living with her at his parents' house. Little did we know that my mother-in-law would turn out to have such a terrible personality. It would have been bearable if it were just her nagging, but what she spouts are outright personal attacks. And they are completely baseless too. You're always holed up in your room playing on the computer, do some work for once, you freeloader. I can hear her snide voice from the hallway. She came to scold me right after breakfast. And to think, I was the one who prepared that breakfast. I have to hold back the urge to retort. For today, at least. After you finish breakfast, I was planning to clean up. Besides, I'm not playing on the computer. I'm working. You always have an excuse. You think I'm dumb just because I don't understand computers, don't you? It's not an excuse. Nowadays, people work all day on computers. I leverage my certified public accountant credentials to work from home. Although I worked in a senior's office for a while after getting a job, now I take on work individually. Since most of the work can be done at home on the computer, I'm dedicated to working from home to balance it with household chores. Even after explaining this to my mother-in-law, she dismissed it with a, "You're just doing piecework, aren't you?" It seems she believes my work can only be part-time or piecework at home. Is it because she can't keep up with modern times that she resorts to baseless sarcasm? Or perhaps because she just wants material for her harassment on me? Probably both. Anyway, I intend to work actively all my life, and it's clear we just don't see eye to eye. Despite my mother-in-law's prejudice, I've managed to balance my work and household duties. I wake up early in the morning to prepare breakfast and lunch for 3. For dinner, I lay out a menu focused on vegetables and light flavors, paying attention to health. And I don't skimp on cleaning either. It seems my approach has had the opposite effect on my mother-in-law. She has stopped doing any household chores herself, constantly complaining about me instead. She spends her days watching TV or occasionally going out for coffee with friends, leading a carefree life. And yet, she has the nerve to call me, a person with high social esteem, a freeloader. I'd like to throw her words right back at her. One day, while feeling frustrated, I was shocked to see the credit card bill that arrived in the mail. What's this? A suit for $1,500, a bag for $2,000. I don't remember buying anything so expensive. Upon closer inspection, the purchases were made with my husband's card. I immediately asked him about it. "Hey, did you buy a suit and a bag?" "You got me." "Yeah, I did." "Needed them for work." "Needed for work? But you're in a regular sales job, aren't you? You don't need anything this expensive." Until now, my husband's suits were around $300, and he bought bags for a similar amount. Nah, good stuff is totally different. It makes me feel more composed and, above all, the appearance is on another level. See? I've gotten cooler recently, right? Do you think so? To me, it doesn't seem that way at all. A young guy in his 20s wearing a suit that's beyond his means looks like he's being swallowed by the suit, which I find rather unsightly. Sarah, you really have no eye for this. My mother-in-law barged into our conversation with gusto. Chris, you look fantastic. Really cool. Thanks, Mom. How dare you criticize how your husband spends his money when you're living off his earnings? Who do you think you are? I was furious with my mother-in-law for intruding into our conversation and making such baseless claims. The nerve, I thought, that's my line. But more than my incomprehensible mother-in-law, my anger grew towards my husband, who didn't back me up at all. I had a lot to say to my husband, but I knew it would end up with my mother-in-law defending him and screeching at me. So, I just warned him, anyway, please refrain from making such expensive purchases. Or at least, consult me beforehand, and left it at that. However, my advice had no effect. My husband's spending only continued to increase. And the expenses were all for entertainment, lavish meals at restaurants, high-end brand scarves and wallets, long-distance taxi fares. There was nothing that seemed truly necessary for work. My husband wasn't like this when we got married. The major factor behind his change was my mother-in-law. You're the man of the house, so act like it. Never help with the housework. Don't let her boss you around just because she's older. You need to show her who's in charge. Like a spell, my mother-in-law chanted this to my husband every day. My indecisive husband, lacking his own will, easily got swept up in her words. To bring back his kind nature, I had to seal away my mother-in-law's cursed words. I resolved to confront her and headed to her room. What do you want? I'm busy, so keep it brief, please. While watching a talk show and sipping her coffee, my mother-in-law spoke with a look of boredom. Listen, we can't save any money because of Chris's wasteful spending. We absolutely need savings for house repairs or illnesses. Anything that might come up. That's just because you're bad at managing money. At his age, he should be making about $90,000 a year, right? You're off by an order of magnitude. Wait, he's making $100,000 a year? To her, an order of magnitude seemed to mean increments of $10,000, but I kept silent. Taking my silence as confirmation, her eyes gleamed. Anyway, could you also tell Chris to stop his wasteful spending? Okay, is that all? If you're done, can you leave? She shooed me away as if I were a dog or a cat, waving her hand dismissively. This is hopeless. A few days later, my mother-in-law stormed into my room, breathing heavily. What do you want, barging in like this? With a smug look, she thrust a green paper at me. Sign this now and get a divorce. You were after Chris's money from the start, you gold digger. Chris has already signed in the divorce oath she held. I snatched the divorce oath from her hand and headed straight to Chris's room. Chris, did you sign this? Yeah, Mom said you were only after my money. I see. And you believed her? Well, she's my mom. His response made up my mind. All right. Let's get a divorce. I packed the divorce oath, my laptop, valuables, and clothes into a suitcase and left my in-laws' house. My parents' house was too far away to return to on a whim. For now, I checked into a business hotel to calm down. Getting a divorce was a definite decision for me. To top it off, I can't believe that I was accused of being after the money. I couldn't imagine living with a man who had given up using his own brain and had a dependent personality. I'll sign the divorce oath to send it to Chris tomorrow. I don't mind getting a divorce at all. In fact, it's a welcome escape, and I have no intention of fighting it. But there's something unforgivable. While meticulously reviewing the credit card statements, I came up with a perfectly legitimate counterattack. After getting a divorce, I was enjoying living alone. I chose a room with good security, so the rent is a bit high, but I have savings from my single days. And it shouldn't be disproportionate to my earnings. Living with Chris and his mother was stressful, and I realized that all over again. About a month after the divorce, I got a call from Chris. Hello? Sarah, please, listen to me. What do you want? I told you in the email that you could dispose of anything I left behind. It's not about that, it's serious. My card's been blocked. I snorted. What does he mean on my card, this blacklisted guy? Of course, it's blocked. You were just an additional cardholder, not the main. It's obvious that it would be blocked once I, the primary cardholder, canceled it. What? Really? That's a problem. I'm a stranger now. Deal with it yourself. With that, I ended the call. He kept calling me obsessively after that, but I never picked up. Actually, before marrying me, Chris had accumulated a lot of debt from revolving payments and installments that he couldn't pay off. I took on all of it and cleared it for him. Looking back, I should have cleared things with him instead. Well, there's no use looking back now. Due to the delays, his credit information must be damaged, and he probably can't get a card in his own name. Anyway, it's none of my business or responsibility anymore. A few days after Chris's incessant calls, there was someone waiting in front of my apartment. It was my former mother-in-law. She had followed me after spotting me in the city and figured out where I lived. I was impressed by her proactive approach, if nothing else. She clung to me, saying that she wanted to talk, and started making a scene, so I reluctantly moved to a nearby family restaurant with her. "What do you want now?" Sarah, this." In her hand there was my passbook. It was filled out on every page, a completed carryover. Not that I needed it anymore. "This salary, could it be, Sarah?" "Yes. That's the salary I earned from working at home." "You treated it like piecework, but I'm a professional." She didn't respond. Her hands trembled as she clutched my passbook. To think the one earning $100,000 a year wasn't Chris. That good-for-nothing could never earn that much. "You were too naive about the world." I said it clearly. My former mother-in-law's delusional mind had convinced her that it was her son, not me, who was earning $100,000 a year. Chris's earnings were about a tenth of mine just before our divorce. Chris was in a sales position with a low base salary but high commissions. The salary system was based on sales performance, but that carefree man was content just to receive his base salary. He was relying on my income for our livelihood. No, he probably didn't even have the strategy to rely on me. It seems my former mother-in-law has finally faced that reality. "Sarah, it's not too late to fix things with Chris." "It's too late," I replied with a sharp interjection. How amusing it was. Even when I interrupted her, my former mother-in-law didn't give up and continued in a cajoling tone. "It's a waste to split up after you fell in love and got married." "It's not a waste. It's much more wasteful for you two to squander the money I earned." "What? That's terrible. How can you say that? Why don't you stop relying on other people's money and work? Then, you won't be a freeloader." "Is that all you wanted to say? To abandon an elderly person in need, you monster." Ignoring my former mother-in-law's howls, I confidently left the diner. I felt relieved from the stress of living together. After witnessing my former mother-in-law's tantrum, it was time to deliver the final blow to Chris. I decided to execute the final part of my plan. Friday night. I waited in front of a building in the entertainment district. It housed several dubious shops, including a nightclub Chris frequented. Just after 9 p.m., Chris appeared. He was arm in arm with a flashy woman who seemed to be a stripper there. "Sarah. Why are you here?" "As usual, you're clueless. I'm here because my card is being used to pay for this place." The payment details listed this club's name several times. And it was always used on Fridays. Knowing the club's name, it was easy to find the address. "Chris, who is this woman?" The woman clinging to Chris looked to be in her early 20s. She was wearing a miniskirt that almost revealed her underwear and a blouse with a deep neckline. "Pleased to meet you. I'm Chris's ex-wife, so basically a stranger to him." "Hey, Sarah. I came here today because I have something to tell you." "Chris. Please return the money I paid off for your debts before our marriage and the money you wasted during our marriage. I'll be sending a legal notice through a lawyer soon, so please respond to it. And you, it seems you've had a lot bought for you by him. But it all came from my money." "Wait, Sarah." Ignoring Chris's calls, I walked away with my heels clicking. How about that for a cool woman? Behind me, I could hear Chris and the woman arguing. The stripper with Chris was likely his affair partner. The credit card statements included expensive makeup and clothes from brands popular with young women. And even charges for short stays at hotels. These suspicious purchases were all concentrated on Fridays. Of course, the payments at the nightclub were also on Fridays. It turned out that Chris had been spending his Friday afternoons on dates with his affair partner. He would spoil her with expensive gifts and then take her to the nightclub for a companion outing. I decided to deal the final blow directly to Chris after seeing this pattern in the statements. I wasn't sure what the affair partner would do once she knew about Chris's financial situation, but I could guess it wouldn't end well. Afterward, as I declared, I sent a legal notice through a lawyer demanding repayment of the money. When it reached Chris and his mother, they came to the lawyer's office. They begged for help, saying, "You're supposed to help people in trouble, right? When the lawyer, Michael, asked about their situation, he learned that their house was filled with collection notices. Credit card bills, utilities, and even taxes. Chris's meager salary couldn't cover them. His mother had also almost no savings. Moreover, Chris's affair partner had demanded a large sum, claiming, "I didn't know he was married. I was deceived. Pay me compensation. We can't afford to pay for Sarah's credit card bills right now. We need a way to write off this debt," they said. But they were consulting the wrong person. After all, they were speaking to my lawyer, who represents the opposing side. If you have a house, why don't you sell it and use the proceeds for repayment and compensation? Michael suggested, then firmly added. If you decide not to repay Sarah, of course, it will lead to a lawsuit. Hearing this, Chris and his mother left with their shoulders slumped. Later, they contacted Michael, saying they would sell the house to repay the debt and asked for some time. That was to be expected, they had no other choice. It took some time, but I got back the money Chris had squandered. Given the ordeal I went through, it would be justified to demand not only this repayment but also compensation for my distress. Considering I'm letting them off with just the credit card bills, they should be grateful. I also made them sign a document promising not to approach me. They will never appear in front of me again. Ah, what a relief. Alone in my comfortable apartment, I laughed out loud. Now, about Chris and his mother settled their debts by selling their house. Afterwards, they reportedly rented a room in a rundown apartment nearby. I've passed by that apartment, it's covered in ivy, with peeling paint, looking at least 50 years old. That must have been what they could afford with Chris's salary and his mother's pension. Far from learning his lesson, Chris became even less motivated and was eventually fired. Then, without looking for another job, he spent his days drinking at home. Eventually, he fell down the apartment stairs while drunk and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. While busy caring for hospitalized Chris and figuring out how to pay for his hospital bills, his mother ended up bedridden with a severe back problem. Because she became immobile, her dementia progressed, and she became unable to live alone. She's now waiting for a place in a cheap facility. I got a call from a relative of Chris, who informed me about their dire situation without me even asking. They even asked if I had any intentions of reconciling with Chris for their sake, but my answer was, of course no. The relative must have anticipated my response because I haven't received any more calls since then. 2 years have passed since the whole ordeal and I've moved again. This time, I'm not living alone. I'm living with a partner I plan to spend my life with. After divorcing Chris, I changed my way of working. I moved back to my parents' house and started working full-time at an office within commuting distance. Not just because my former mother-in-law was getting older, but my parents are too, and I wanted to be there to help them if needed. It was at this new job that I met my current husband. A year younger than me, he's dependable, a stark contrast to Chris. Most importantly, he loves and cherishes me. With my previous husband, I couldn't even consider having children because of his unstable income and personality. But with my current husband, I feel we can tackle parenting together. Holding a positive pregnancy test, I can't help but smile, imagining my husband's joyous reaction. This time, I'm determined to build a proper family and seize happiness. You need to leave because John and his wife Emily are coming back for their childbirth. My husband exclaimed loudly. Leave? Me? When I asked for clarification, my husband nodded with a smile. If it weren't for you, things would be smooth. I've always thought so. I really despise people who always argue with their so-called logical reasoning. There are plenty of other women out there. Just because we've been together for a long time doesn't mean we have to stay together forever. It was my husband who made this bold statement. Whatever troubles he may face in the future, it's no longer my concern. He might think he can just sleep it off and forget, but not this time. He should take responsibility for his words. My name is Margaret, and I'm 55 years old. Currently, I live with my husband, Michael, just the two of us. Michael is 60 years old, 5 years my senior. He recently retired. He seemed pleased, saying, "Maybe I'll take it easy from now on and enjoy some fishing as a hobby." Meanwhile, I run a small but successful apparel business, which is doing quite well, thankfully. The reason we can afford an apartment with a bit higher rent is thanks to this business. Michael used to be supportive, but things changed after his retirement. First, his daily routine changed. Now that he's retired and always at home, he has many days with no plans. As a result, he started to lead a more lax lifestyle, with an increase in days spent lounging around. He would stay up late watching TV or sleep past noon. If it's occasionally, that's fine. But when it continues for several days, I can't help but become concerned. Even when I suggested, we're not young anymore, maybe we shouldn't disrupt our daily routine so much, he wouldn't listen. Instead, he would snap at me, saying, "I've worked hard all my life, let me do what I want. Don't tell me what to do." Another issue was his boredom. He had few friends to begin with, and his only hobby was fishing alone. After retirement, he seemed to have too much free time. What he started doing was nitpicking my housework. Frankly, housework is not my forte. Due to my busy work schedule, I rely heavily on the latest home appliances. I depend on a cleaning robot for cleaning and electronic cooking devices for meals. But my husband didn't like that. These robots can't possibly clean every nook and cranny. It's more reliable to do it by hand. Saying such things, he forced me to do the mopping. Additionally, there was a time when he complained about the dinner. Stew should be slowly cooked in a pot with high-quality wine. It won't taste good with cheap wine, he argued. Even though he never cared before, he started imposing his preferences on me. At times, he would even say, "Stop looking for easy ways out. You lazy housewife." I would consider his requests if I had the time. But I'm too busy with work to have such leisure time. After all, if he's retired and has free time, he could do it himself. When I pointed this out, he got furious and said, "Just because you're working, don't get too full of yourself." I couldn't help but understand why some people opt for a divorce later in life. Still, I endured, thinking of all the hard work we've put in over the years. But then something happened that made him even more unbearable. That something was the pregnancy of our son's wife. Our only son, John. He and his wife, Emily, announced that she was pregnant. Actually, John and I are not blood related. He is Michael's child from a previous marriage. Michael and I remarried when John was about 10 years old. Upon hearing the pregnancy news, Michael was ecstatic. Our first grandchild. Yes, it's exciting. I was happy too, but Michael's joy was extraordinary. I think he was experiencing what you might call an overenthusiastic grandparent. That's why things turned out the way they did. The main reason why he was so excited about the pregnancy announcement was probably because Emily said she wanted to come stay with us for her delivery. Emily was raised in a single-parent household. She turned to us this time because her mom is too busy with work and couldn't accommodate her. Michael was all too eager to help. I want to welcome the baby in the best possible conditions. With that, he started preparing. That was fine in itself, but for some reason, he insisted that I be involved in everything. The crib should be this one. Just in case, get all types of baby formula. Oh, and we need to stock up on diapers too. He would just give orders arrogantly. But I was busy with work and household chores. Even when I managed to find time to prepare amidst my busy schedule, I often received complaints that it wasn't right. Not like that. I told you, that's not what I meant. Hey, enough is enough. I get that you're excited, but if that's the case, do it yourself. Stop relying on me for everything. He must have never imagined I would stand up to him like that. He was stunned into silence. Our first grandchild, you know? And you say such distant things. I see, it's because you're not related by blood to John. You don't find him dear. Do you? That's not it at all. Don't say such terrible things. You're just going too far. I thought Emily wouldn't want to come if she knew you were doing all this. It doesn't seem like a relaxing environment. Michael tried to retort but couldn't find the right words. He clenched his back teeth in frustration and went into his room. I shouldn't have said that much. It was just that he was too enthusiastic, and I ended up saying too much because I was being stubborn too. And to be spoken of John in such a manner was shocking to me as well. I do want John and Emily to feel relaxed. That's exactly why I had to stop Michael's reckless behavior. I wanted to make amends with him afterward, but he wouldn't come out of his room. With no other choice, I said through the door, "I'm sorry about yesterday. I'm off to work now," and left for work. That day, I had many troubles at work and returned home much later than expected. At this rate, dinner would be late. What should I make? Thinking about this on my way home, I found Michael already sitting at the dining table, waiting. "I'm home. Sorry for being late. I'll make dinner as quickly as I can." There was no response from him. I moved around busily, trying to make dinner in a hurry. Michael just sat there, watching me, as if to pressure me. If he's going to be home anyway, he could at least make dinner. At the very least, he doesn't need to rush me like this. Finally, I managed to prepare grilled chicken and placed it on the table. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Let's eat." Without a word, he immediately started devouring the grilled chicken. "Were you that hungry?" I also took my seat and began eating the grilled chicken with my fork. Before I was halfway through my meal, he had finished eating. After finishing, he sat up straight and looked at me. "What?" I asked, and he replied in a low voice. "You're always about work, 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 neglecting the household chores." "What?" His unexpected words almost made me drop my fork. "What are you talking about? I'm not neglecting anything. Don't play dumb. Like today, for example. Just grilled chicken, no salad, no soup? That's unacceptable. Indeed, I usually serve salad and soup with meals. But it wasn't out of laziness today." He was watching me so intently, as if hurrying me, that I thought he wanted to eat quickly, so I hurried things along. Even though I explained this, he seemed unconvinced. "It's not just that. You negate everything I say or do. You must be looking down on me because I'm retired now. You think you're better because you're working. That's not true at all." No matter how many times I denied it, he wouldn't be convinced. I was getting increasingly frustrated. Let's stop this fruitless argument. John and Emily will be visiting soon, and I don't want to greet them in such a negative atmosphere. At this, Michael smirked. "Yeah, that's right. I've been thinking the same. That's why I've come up with a great solution." "A great solution?" As I tilted my head, he loudly said, "John and Emily are coming back for their childbirth, so you need to leave." "What?" It seemed unbelievable, but he wasn't joking. "Leave? Me?" When I asked again, he nodded with a smile. "I think things will go smoothly if you're not around." "I've always thought so. I really despise people like you who always argue with their so-called logical reasoning. There are plenty of other women out there." I was shocked. After decades of marriage, to hear such words. Michael seemed to be getting carried away, his words flowing non-stop. From his mouth poured a stream of complaints directed at me. "First of all, you lack respect for me, the head of the household. Always complaining instead of just listening quietly." "Complaining? I respect your wishes as much as I can. But it's you who keeps making unreasonable demands. Besides..." Shut up, shut up. I hate the way you talk. So arrogant, talking down to me. Just be quiet and leave. I don't even want to see your face." Michael slammed the table with force. At this point, it was clear that nothing I said would make a difference. I simply said, "Understood," and returned to my room. The next morning, I immediately called a moving company. After being treated that way, I wasn't going to stay any longer than necessary. Luckily, it wasn't the peak moving season, so I was able to get an estimate and book the movers without any trouble. All I wanted now was to complete everything while he was away. But he was almost always at home, so what to do? As I worried, it seemed like divine intervention occurred. "I'll be going out for a bit from tomorrow." He is the type who thinks everything resets after a night's sleep. So, he spoke to me quite normally. Apparently, he was invited by his fishing buddies for an overnight trip. This was my chance. There was a slight awkwardness between us. Perhaps this time, even he realized he had gone too far. Yet, there was no apology from him. Perhaps he was hoping to pretend yesterday's outburst never happened. He's always been like that. Until now, I've been the bigger person, turning a blind eye. But after what was said, I can't just let it slide anymore. The moving estimate came quickly. I planned to take all the furniture and appliances with me, but it was less than I expected. The issue was finding a place to move to. But that was resolved smoothly as well. A person named Sophia, whom I knew through work, offered to let me stay at her place. And it was a brand new building, no less. Are you sure about this? I asked again. You have helped me so much, she said, so I decided to accept the offer. I went to see the property right away. It was more than satisfactory, with no issues at all. I then completed the move while Michael was away. Thanks to his tirade, I had no regrets. Perhaps I had grown weary of life with him too. The night after I moved, Michael called. Thinking, here it comes, I took a deep breath before answering the phone. Hello? Margaret. What is this? What's going on? Even from his voice, I could tell he was panicking. I almost laughed but responded calmly. What do you mean? The house, it's empty. What's happened here? Oh. You told me to leave, so I did just that. I took everything, from the latest appliances to my favorite dining table. I just told you to leave, not to take everything from the house. That's crazy. What? It would be crazy to leave them behind. I bought all those things with my own money. You said they weren't necessary and didn't contribute a cent. He fell silent, but after a moment, he managed to say, as if squeezing the words out. Well, it's fine. John and Emily are coming tomorrow. We'll manage without the furniture. Imagine their surprise when they see that room. Good. Then it worked out perfectly. Say hi to John and Emily for me. There was no point in continuing the conversation. I hung up quickly. There was another significant matter, but since he hadn't noticed, I didn't mention it. The next day, John called to say, we're almost there. Didn't he tell you? I've left the house. Really? John seemed surprised but didn't probe further. In fact, I sensed more relief than shock in his voice. Wow, you're not there. We can do whatever we want then. You're not coming back, right? That's right. I always had a feeling, but John probably found me annoying. He didn't like that I didn't coddle him because he was a stepchild. You're not as kind as other women, young John once told me. I thought I was raising him with love so he wouldn't struggle in the future. Well, it's better this way. We don't have to walk on eggshells around each other. Emily wasn't fond of you either, so she'll be happy. Take care. Being overly talkative must be something he inherited from his father. After hanging up the phone, I found myself pondering this. I was somewhat on edge that day, making it hard to focus on work. I thought I might receive a call regarding the furniture and appliances. Previously, Emily had mentioned, having all these appliances must make things so much easier for you. I secretly suspected that their return might be motivated by these conveniences. Contrary to my expectations, there were no calls that day. The call finally came at the end of the month. Margaret? I immediately knew the reason for my husband's hesitant call. But I pretended to be clueless. What? About the rent. Yes. What about it? He probably wanted to ask for the rent due to his pride but couldn't bring himself to say it. The rent for the apartment I lived in with Michael was $1,700. I was the one paying for it all. My retired husband couldn't afford it. He might manage for a while using his retirement fund, but it would eventually run out. He should just come out and say it since he called. But he hemmed and hawed. Finally, I decided to confront him. What? You're not expecting me to pay the rent for an apartment I'm not living in, are you? No. No, I mean, you're the one who told me to leave, remember? And now you're coming back to me for help? His pride wouldn't allow for such a request. As expected, he changed the subject. Margaret, are you okay? Do you have a place to stay? Yes, thanks to the kindness of people around me, I found a place. I'm living comfortably. Saying this would make it impossible for him to ask me to return. Not that I had any intention of going back, just to be clear. Oh, that's good. John and Emily seem lonely. I thought maybe, if you're willing, you could come back? This was something he would never say under normal circumstances. He must be desperate. But I had no intention of returning. Really? But didn't both of them dislike me? No, that's not. Well, it's fine. I have something to discuss with you anyway, so I'll come over. Yes. I needed to have a very important conversation for the sake of my future life. Michael replied brightly, yes. I'll be waiting. Later, I visited the apartment for the first time in a while. It's been a while. Michael had dressed up unnecessarily. Dressing up wouldn't change anything. As we walked into the living room, I saw John and Emily sitting there. They must have realized they couldn't live like that for long. New furniture like a sofa, table, and refrigerator had been set up. John waved casually, while Emily gave me a glare but greeted me nonetheless. The atmosphere was unpleasant. I wanted to get things done and go home quickly. Prompted by Michael, I sat down in a chair. So, what's this about? Grateful that he broached the topic first, I decided to proceed with the conversation. It's about this. I think it's best to handle these matters promptly and properly. Upon seeing what I handed him, his face turned pale instantly. You're planning to divorce me? He was trembling as he looked at the divorce papers I had filled out. Yes. Ever since you told me to leave, I've been planning to do just that. Did you really think I wouldn't take you seriously? Michael fell silent. It was probably spot on. When his emotions flare up, he tends to blurt out whatever is on his mind at that moment. This habit of not thinking about the consequences has reportedly caused him trouble at work multiple times. I don't want to see your face. There are other women out there. What else was it? Anyway, after being showered with every conceivable insult, I couldn't see a future with you anymore. He probably remembers saying those things, even if he didn't think them through. Michael's head remained lowered, sweating profusely. Yeah, I said it. But that wasn't. I mean, it wasn't what I really meant. You can say such things without meaning them? I'm appalled. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I was shocked. I can't do this anymore. That's all. Looking directly at him, our eyes met. He immediately flinched and averted his gaze from mine. Won't you reconsider? We've come so far together. After all we've been through, to be told such things, it's impossible. I can't be with you anymore. As I stated my position firmly, he let out a long sigh. The silence was so intense it was almost painful. Unexpectedly, it was Emily who broke that silence. Excuse me. The one who's being most inconvenienced here is me. Turning towards Emily, I tilted my head, and she glared at me with eyes full of resentment. What do you mean? I thought it would be perfect here, with you around, a clean house, and all the latest appliances. I came here expecting to be fully taken care of. And now, to be caught up in this marital dispute, it's a huge nuisance. Emily let out an even bigger sigh than Michael had earlier. She was angry with me because she had expected a pampered princess life here, but it didn't turn out as she had hoped. It was a complete misunderstanding. If she's unhappy, she can leave, go back to her parents' house, or anywhere else. Her decision to stay here is her own. When I conveyed this, Emily's face turned bright red with anger. What? How dare you speak to me like that? After I went out of my way to come here. I never asked you to come. Emily looked like she was about to scream. Her breaths were heavy and rapid. But that's ridiculous. I told my hopes to Michael, and you have no idea how much I was looking forward to this. And now this, it's too much. Finally, Emily burst into tears. John was beside her, trying to console her. But this made things a bit clearer for me. Michael's excessive enthusiasm for his grandchild was likely fueled by Emily's expectations. Being relied on and flattered probably went to his head, making him act like he was on top of the world. However, that doesn't change anything. Emily was too upset to have a coherent conversation, and Michael was still frozen in place, sweating. Staying here any longer was pointless. There's no use in me staying any longer. I'm going home. We'll settle the divorce through a lawyer. As I stood up, it was John's turn to shout. Running away, you coward. Not taking any responsibility and just stirring things up. I was shocked by the sheer unreasonableness. It was a classic case of blaming the victim. I approached John and stood by his side. Since he was sitting close to Emily, I ended up looking down on him. What do you want? How old do you think you are? What? I'm 35, but... I took a deep breath and glared at John sharply. So? What responsibility do you think I have? To take care of a 35-year-old boy and his wife? Or maybe the responsibility to take care of a 60-year-old dad? John was gaping, at a loss for words. I couldn't stop myself anymore. All of you are adults. Enough is enough. Who's been stirring things up? Despite my best intentions to keep the peace. You've been using me like a stepping stone. You can't expect me to always smile and comply. Hey, calm down, Mom. Don't act like a child now. I had shouted so much that I was out of breath. I took a deep breath to steady myself. At least. John, I've always cared for you. I tried to raise you as my own child. But if that didn't come across, that's my fault. John started to say something but then fell silent. I quickly grabbed my things and left the room hastily. No one followed me out. Afterward, my husband agreed to the divorce quite easily. We decided on no alimony for either side. He said he couldn't afford the apartment's rent and would move out. Michael, who had never done any housework before. Living alone from now on will likely be a significant challenge for him. In a letter passed through the lawyer, written in the familiar handwriting of my ex-husband, it said, "Thank you for everything." He even suggested getting back together, but I firmly refused, and he seemed quite dejected. John and Emily decided to move to Emily's parents' house for their delivery. Emily was reluctant, but John convinced her. After the divorce, John called me once. "I'm sorry for everything. I'll try to be a parent like you," he said, sounding embarrassed. Perhaps John hadn't disliked me as much as I thought, maybe he just couldn't express himself honestly. I ended up buying the new house I was renting and still live there. Work is going well. I was a bit tired right after the divorce, but now I feel refreshed. The relief of not having to take care of anyone is immensely liberating. I don't know how many more years I can work, but I plan to do my best as long as I can. Of course, I'll enjoy my personal life too. And in my heart, I secretly wish for John's happiness.